segment of one of my videos. Like, it's not a whole video dedicated to reading this, so I'm going to start from the beginning, and then if I make another video I will continue from where I finished reading today. Yeah, so I'll start with the English, and then I will very badly read the French, because my French is not very good, and reading in French out loud is quite difficult for me. I don't know why, but it is. So I'll read the blurb of both of them, and then we'll get started. This should only, like, I'm not going to be reading for a long time, because otherwise I'll be sat here all day, and you won't want to listen to that either. But anyway, okay, so Merceau will not conform. When his mother dies, he refuses to show his emotions, simply to satisfy the expectations of others, and when he commits a random act of violence on a sun-drenched beach, his lack of remorse only compounds his guilt in the eyes of society and the law. Albert Camus' portrayal of a man confronting the absurdity of human life became an existentialist classic, yet it is also a dreamlike, sensual book filled with quiet joy in a tender indifference of the physical world. And then the cover photo is a sun, which is a common theme throughout the book. I used to study this book, or the French version, and the sun is a big part of the book. Okay, and then the French version is it's kind of different, the blurbs, but anyway. Quand la sonnerie a encore renti que la porte du box s'est ouverte, c'est le silence de la salle qui est monté vers moi. Le silence et cette singulière sensation que j'ai eue lorsque j'ai constaté que le jeune journaliste avait détourné les yeux. Je n'ai pas regardé du côté de Marie. J'en ai pas eu le temps parce que le président m'a dit dans une forme bizarre que j'aurais la tête tranchée sur une place publique au nom du peuple français. I'm sorry if I make any mistakes as well with the French. I don't know, I panic and then just like read it like fast in my head, but I know that it comes out quite slowly. And then this is the picture. So, let's begin. I'll start with the English. So, Chapter 1. My mother died today, or maybe yesterday, I don't know. I received a telegram from the old people's home. Mother deceased, funeral tomorrow. Very sincerely yours. That doesn't mean anything. It might have been yesterday. The old people's home is in Marengo, 80 kilometers from Algiers. I'll get the bus at 2 o'clock and arrive in the afternoon. That way I can be at the wake and come home tomorrow night. I asked my boss for 2 days off and he couldn't say no given the circumstances, but he didn't seem happy about it. I even said, it's not my fault. He didn't reply. Then I thought I shouldn't have said that. Although I had nothing to apologise for, he was the one who should have been offering me his condolences. But he'll no doubt say something the day after tomorrow when he sees me dressed in black. For now, it's still a little as if Mama hadn't died. After the funeral, however, it will be over and done with, a matter that is officially closed. I got the bus at 2 o'clock. It was very hot. I ate at Celeste's restaurant, as I always do. Everyone felt sorry for me, and Celeste said, you only have one mother. When I got up to leave, they walked me to the door. I felt a little strange because I had to go up to Emmanuel's place to borrow a black tie and armband. He lost his uncle a few months ago. I had to run to catch the bus, rushing around, running like that, plus the bumpy ride, the smell of petrol, the sun's glare reflecting off the road. All that must have been why I felt so drowsy. I slept for nearly the whole journey. When I woke up, I was leaning against a soldier who smiled at me and asked if I had come a long way. I said yes, so I wouldn't have to talk anymore. The old people's home is 2 kilometers from the village. I walked. I wanted to see Mama right away, at some papers, then said, Madame Merceau came to us 3 years ago. You were the only one who could support her financially. I thought he was reproaching me for something and started to explain, but he stopped me. You have no reason to justify yourself, my dear boy. I've read your mother's file. You weren't able to look after all her needs. She required a nurse. You earn a very modest living, and to tell the truth, she was happier here with us. I said, yes, monsieur. She had friends here, you know, he added, people of her own age. She could share her interests from the past with them. You're young, and she was probably bored when she was living with you. It was true. When we lived together, Mama spent all her time silently watching me come and go. The first few days she was at the old people's home, she often cried, but that was because her routine had changed. After a few months, she would have cried if she'd been taken out of the home. For the same reason, that was partly why I hadn't gone to visit her often during the past year, and also because it took up my whole Sunday, not to mention the time and effort to buy a ticket, get the bus, and travel for 2 hours each way. The director was talking to me again, but I was barely listening. Then he said, I assume you would like to see your mother. I stood up without saying anything and followed him out the door. On the staircase, he explained, we put her in our little mortuary, so we didn't upset the others. Every time one of our residents dies, they feel anxious for 2 or 3 days, and that makes it difficult for us to do our job. We walked through a courtyard where there were a lot of old people chatting in little groups. They stopped talking as we walked by. Once we had passed, their conversation started up again. They sounded like parakeets squawking in the distance. When we reached the door of a small building, the director stopped. I'll leave you here, Monsieur Merceau. I'll be in my office if you need anything. The funeral was set for 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, so you could attend the wake of your dearly departed. One more thing. Your mother, it seemed, often told her companions that she wished to have a religious burial. I have taken the liberty of arranging everything, but I wanted to let you know. I thanked him. While not actually an atheist, Mama had never once in her life given a thought to religion. I went inside. The room was very bright, whitewashed, with a glass roof. There were chairs and trestles in the shape of an X. In the centre of the room, 2 of them supported the coffin. The lid was closed. All you could see were its shiny metal screws, barely secured, sticking out from the stained walnut planks. Near the coffin was an Arab nurse in a white smock, wearing a brightly coloured scarf over her head. At that moment, the caretaker came in behind me. He must have been running. He stammered a little. We closed the casket, so I have to unscrew the lid for you to see her. He started walking towards the coffin, but I stopped him. You don't want to? He asked. I replied no. He stopped and I was uncomfortable because I felt I shouldn't have said that. After a moment he looked at me and asked, why? But without sounding reproachful, just as if he was simply asking a question, I said, I don't know. Then he twirled his white moustache through his fingers and without looking at me he said, I understand. He had beautiful light blue eyes and a slightly ruddy complexion. He brought a chair over for me and then sat down himself a little behind me. The nurse stood up and headed for the exit. At that moment the caretaker said, she has leprosy. I didn't understand, so I looked up at the nurse and saw that she had a bandage around her head, just below her eyes. It sat flat where her nose had been eaten away by the disease. All you could see was the whiteness of the bandage against her face. After she left, the caretaker said, I'll leave you alone. I don't know what gesture I made, but he stood up at the back of my chair and didn't move. His present blushed and apologized. It's alright, I got them, it's alright. I agreed with what he said and found it interesting. In the little mortuary, he told me he had no money when he first came to the home. Since he considered himself healthy, he had offered to take on the job of caretaker. I pointed out to him that when all was said and done, he was one of the residents. He said he wasn't. I had already been struck by the way he said they, the others, and more rarely, the old people, when he spoke about the residents, some of whom were the same age as him. But naturally, it was different. He was the caretaker, and to a certain extent, he had more privileges and some authority over them. Then the nurse came in. Night had fallen quite suddenly. And that is where I will leave that for 7 pages. Yeah. Okay, hopefully we'll get to the same point in the French one. It's really warm. Okay. Let's begin. This is gonna go so badly. Okay. Aujourd'hui, maman est morte. Ou peut-être hier, je ne sais pas. J'ai reçu un télégramme de l'asile. Mère décidée. Enterrement demain. Sentiment distingué. Cela ne veut rien dire. C'était peut-être hier. L'asile de Veilla est à Marengo, à 80 km d'Alger. Je prendrai l'autobus à 2 heures. This is very bad. Et j'arriverai dans l'après-midi. Ainsi, je pourrai veiller et je rentrerai demain soir. J'ai demandé 2 jours de congé à mon patron et il ne pouvait pas me les refuser avec une excuse pareille. Mais il n'avait pas l'air content. Je lui ai même dit « ce n'est pas de ma faute ». Il n'a pas répondu. J'ai pensé alors que je n'aurais pas dû lui dire cela. En somme, je n'avais pas à m'excuser. C'était plutôt à lui de me présenter ses condolences. Mais il le fera sans doute après-demain, quand il me verra en deuil. Pour le moment, c'est un peu comme si maman n'était pas morte. Après l'enterrement, au contraire, ça sera une affaire glacée et tout aura refondu une allure plus officielle. J'ai pris l'autobus à 2 heures. Il faisait très chaud. J'ai mangé au restaurant chez Céleste, comme d'habitude. Ils avaient tout beaucoup de pain pour moi. Et Céleste m'a dit « on n'a qu'une mère ». Quand je suis partie, ils m'ont accompagnée à la porte. J'étais un peu étourdie parce qu'il a fallu que je monte chez Emmanuel pour lui emprunter une cravate noire et un brassard. Il a perdu son ongle il y a quelques mois. J'ai couru pour ne pas manquer le départ. C'est à cause de tout cela sans doute, ajouté aux carottes, à l'odeur de l'essence, à la réverbération de la route et du ciel, que je me suis assoupie. J'ai dormi pendant presque tout le trajet. Et quand je me suis réveillée, j'étais tassée contre un militaire qui m'a souri et qui m'a demandé si je venais de loin. J'ai dit oui pour n'avoir plus à parler. L'asile est 2 km du village. J'ai fait le chemin à pied. J'ai voulu voir maman tout de suite, mais le concierge m'a dit qu'il fallait que je rencontrais le directeur. Comme il était occupé, j'ai entendu un peu. Pendant tout ce temps, le concierge a parlé et ensuite j'ai vu le directeur. Il m'a reçu dans son bureau. C'était un peu vieux, avec la Légion d'honneur. Il m'a regardé de ses yeux clairs, puis il m'a serré la suivre, des yeux en silence. Dans les premiers jours où elle était à l'asile, elle pleurait souvent. Mais c'était à cause de l'habitude. Au bout de quelques mois, elle aurait pleuré si on l'avait retirée de l'asile. Toujours à cause de l'habitude. C'est un peu pour cela que, dans la dernière année, je n'y suis presque plus allée. Et puis parce que cela me prenait mon dimanche, sans compter l'effort pour aller à l'autobus, prendre des tickets vers 2 heures de route. 2 heures de route. Le directeur m'a encore parlé, mais je ne l'écoutais presque plus. Puis il m'a dit, je suppose que vous voulez voir votre mère. Je me suis levée sans rien dire et il m'a précédée vers la porte. Dans l'escalier, il m'a expliqué, nous l'avons transportée dans notre petit morgue pour ne pas impressionner les autres chaque fois qu'un pensionnaire meurt. Les autres sont neveux pendant 2 ou 3 jours et ça rend le service difficile. Nous avons traversé une cour où il y avait beaucoup de vieillards, bavardant par petits groupes. Ils se taisaient. Quoi? Taise. Je ne sais pas. Ils se taisaient quand nous passions. Et derrière nous, la conversation reprenait. On aurait dit un jacassement assourdi de perruches. À la porte d'un petit bâtiment, le directeur m'a quitté. Je vous laisse, monsieur Masseux. Je suis à votre disposition dans mon bureau. En principe, l'enterrement est fixé à 10 heures du matin. Nous avons pensé que vous pourriez ainsi veiller la disparue. En dernier mot, votre mère a, paraît-il, exprimé souvent à ses compagnons le désir d'être enterré religieusement. J'ai pris ce mois de faire le nécessaire, mais je voulais vous informer. Je l'ai remercié. Maman, sans être athée, n'avait jamais pensé de son vivant à la religion. Je suis entrée. C'était une salle très claire, blanchie à la chaux et recouverte d'une verrerie. Elle était meuble de chaises et de chevalets en forme de X. Deux d'entre eux, au centre, supportaient une pierre recouverte de son couvercle. On voit seulement des filles brillantes, à peine enfoncées, se détacher sur les planchers passés au bout de noix. À ce moment, le concierge est entré derrière mon dos. Il avait du courrier. Il a bégayé un peu. On l'a couvert, mais je dois diffuser la bière pour que vous puissiez la voir. Il s'approchait de la bière quand je l'ai arrêté. Il m'a dit, vous ne voulez pas? J'ai répondu, non. Il s'est interrompu et j'étais gênée parce que je ne sentais que je n'aurais pas dû dire cela. Au bout d'un moment, il m'a regardé et il m'a demandé pourquoi, mais sans reproche, comme s'il s'informait. J'ai dit, je ne sais pas. Alors, tourtillant sa moustache blanche, il a déclaré sans me regarder, je comprends. I'm gonna stop reading now. It's really difficult to read because it's always like the words are cut off and they're on the next line, so it's harder for me to read. That's my excuse for my poor French. But I hope that was somewhat relaxing. More so